Welcome back everyone to Tarvold's Perspective Metroid Edition, a series where I spew out my thoughts and opinions about a game and try to squeeze a laugh or two out of you. Today, I'm taking a look at the first Metroid game released on the Wii, Metroid Prime 3, Corruption. This was really hard to get off my shelf, I'll show you later. This game tends to get a lot of crap, but is it for good reason? Let's take a look and find out. For recording all the footage on the console Prime games, I've been using the Metroid Prime Trilogy version on my Wii U, mainly because it loads faster, has a higher resolution, is in widescreen, and I can capture it through HDMI.
And I just want to be as pretty as I can for you. You deserve me at my best, champ. You've been working really hard lately. You earned it.
What comes with that, though, is the Wiimote and nunchuck controls. I've gone on record before praising just how smooth and natural this feels in Prime 1 and 2. And this game right here is who we really have to thank, since the control scheme was first introduced in Prime 3. Long gone are the days of stiff GameCube controller aiming, and we've now fully embraced the motion controls. And because this is the game that introduced them, it can really use them to their full potential. I'll get into this in more detail later, but for now, let's dig into what exactly is going on in this game. Things start off with a strange message being displayed on Samus's ship, indicating that she's in stasis as her ship is autopiloting towards the planet Norian. But something about her life support system detects something off. We're then shown a bunch of what appears to be, for lack of a better term, Phazon testicles just popping off. And from one of these danglers comes the daughter you wish you never had, Dark Samus. Cut to Zero Suit Samus waking up in her ship as her suit activates and just way too many LED lights turn on all over her ship's dashboard. Can we give the girl a second to wake up? Jeez! As she looks out the windshield, she can see that she's made it to the Galactic Federation HQ, with huge ships and space stations all orbiting a nearby planet. As her ship approaches, she's asked by a human voice to input her code to get clearance to board. And it's here where you'll experience the first big gameplay change to the Prime formula, contextual motion control inputs. Using the Wiimote, you're forced to move Samus's left hand all over the place, booping all the buttons in your ship as you hear a ton of fully voiced dialogue coming in from the feds. It's a bit jarring starting things this way, since the series has always kept Samus very isolated thus far. Lots of change coming at you fast and furious, and yet it oddly feels very familiar. After smashing all the lights like Yeezy, you're finally granted permission to board the GFS Olympus as you descend from your ship like a glowing goddess, as that classic game load theme plays. A couple of soldiers ask you to calibrate your aim and...
Samus, welcome to the flagship.
What did he just call me?
Samus.
From here you can just walk around amongst actual people, Federation soldiers and scientists, and talk to them like it's goddamn Oblivion. There's no enemies, no puzzles to be solved, just NPCs that you can push A in front of to get dialogue?
Ew, David!
You proceed through the ship, continuing to use motion controls to enter in passwords and such. But can I just say that this is some terrible digital security right here? Seriously? You're just gonna blast her password up on the screen like that? A place like this needs a bit more protection, don't you think? Which brings us to the sponsor for this episode, Norian VPN. Use the code TQSUS to protect your unencrypted galactic data from being space pirated today. Anywho, you end up being scanned by some scientists in an encased little room, and my god, I cannot shake this feeling of familiarity this gives me. Also, none of these assholes seem to have any time or interest in talking to you.
I'm sorry, but I can't be distracted right now.
Can I help you? I'm sorry, but this requires my full attention. I'm too busy to talk right now.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I bother you? Actually, whoa, this does kind of look intense. All right, my bad, dude. You focus on that. Don't fuck this up. Eventually, you come to the briefing room where you meet Admiral Dane and your homies, the Warriors 3. Let the exposition explosion commence. Apparently, the Federation network is all controlled by these Aurora units, which are artificial life forms that look like giant brains. Now that I recognize. No way this goes badly, but man, the Galactic Federation have the biggest hard-on for trend hopping onto whatever horrible threat to the galaxy they can get their hands on, don't they? Can't wait for the Galactic Federation NFTs. The space pirates had apparently infected the AU units with a virus, which triggered an emergency shutdown of the network to prevent it from doing any damage. This unfortunately has made the Federation defenses particularly vulnerable. Samus and her... Samus and her 3 buds, Rundus, Gore, and Gundrea, are tasked with delivering a vaccine to each of the AU units on 3 different planets to recover the network and find out what the space pirates are actually up to. Alright, let's just stop there for a second to dissect this. There is a huge contrast going on here than what us Metroid fans have been accustomed to. Loads of dialogue, a highly populated, clean area, comrades who know and respect you hanging around. There's a lot going on. These 3 hunters supposedly have this rapport with Samus, but as the player,
I don't even know who you are.
not only that, but everyone else is chatting up a storm, but Samus just stands around like a goon staring at people. I don't know, I feel like it just makes her seem like a complete asshole. I'm not sure why she doesn't talk to them. Aren't they like co-workers? We've seen her talk before already in previous games. Feels really weird to me. She ain't no JRPG pro tag. I'll admit, my gut reaction to this tone shift initially was, this doesn't feel like Metroid to me. But we'll put a pin in that for a second, as I want to speak on that after we've gone through some more of this story schmeat, because I got thoughts. So all of a sudden, the entire place is under attack, and Dane instructs us to defend the place and not allow the space pirates to take hold. We see a giant orbiting space defense system get destroyed, and okay, nope, I got it now. Let's just get into this now. This entire intro section has a striking, uncanny, and almost definitely deliberate similarity to a game released just prior to this one, Halo 2. I mean, it's not just me, right? Let's take a look at some of these moments. It's unreal. And so many more. Now, am I saying this is a bad thing? Not necessarily, no. Halo 2 is a fantastic game, one of my all-time favorites in fact, but going back to what I said earlier, it just didn't feel very Metroid-like to me. However, for me, that was also true about Metroid Prime 1 and 2. I alluded to this in earlier videos, but I feel like Prime 1 was trying its best to emulate Super Metroid in 3D, and Prime 2 was trying to emulate Metroid Fusion in 3D. Let's take a step backwards and break this down a bit. I always felt like the Prime games were both attempting to find their own identity while at the same time clinging to the past. They leaned hard on the 2D games as a crutch and did their best to emulate that experience in 3D, and for my taste, it just did not click successfully. The final products just ended up feeling like a mixture of a slower, more monotonous version of the 2D games, and an FPS whose combat was incredibly dull. This goes for not only the gameplay, but the story as well. For instance, Metroid Prime opens up with a space station in distress, ending with a self-destruction and that scamp Ridley fleeing to the closest planet, which sends Samus on a hunt to find him, just like Super Metroid. The game ends basically the same way, with a final conclusion happening in an area smothered in Metroids, and a final boss showdown where you use their own hyper beam against them to defeat them. Prime 2 takes the whole dark reflection theming of the SAX, and has Dark Samus be a presence looming over you, and shows up about the same amount of times as the SAX did to screw with you. Not only that, but a lot of the bosses in the game are using your old upgrades against you after they infected your suit at the start of the game, just like the X-Parasite. Wrap that all up in the darker horror theming of both games, and you can really see the blueprints laying on top of each other matching up in a lot of ways. A bunch of the upgrades they brought from 2D to 3D didn't really transfer well either, or felt lesser than they did in the past. You could almost say they had a rough transition. The grappling beam almost never has any interesting uses in Prime, whereas in Super Metroid there were loads of places you could pull off some fun momentum-based swooping and flooping. The X-ray scope was an optional tool that let you see through the environment, but in 3D it just lets you see invisible stuff? What? Beam upgrades would totally change the properties of your projectiles and change how you approach combat with certain enemies. But in 3D, they more so act as keys or boring color matching combat slogs. Anyway, I won't go any deeper into this since I've already done so plenty in the past, but I just wanted to provide a couple examples. It wasn't even the fact that these games were clearly trying to be 3D versions of previous titles that bothered me so much. It was a myriad of other issues that I, again, have already mentioned. But because of this, I just end up looking at these games as 3D Super Metroid and Metroid Fusion, but worse. Now, to get to the friggin' point, Prime 3, to me, finally, feels like it's trying to be its own independent experience. Yes, I did just compare the intro heavily to Halo 2, but honestly, after this first intro sequence, the similarities between this and Halo fade away pretty quickly. The game explores a lot of new ideas to the series instead of trying to be a glow-up of its sexy 2D past. That said, let's wrap up the intro so we can dive deeper into some gameplay talk. Eventually, you need to take the fight to the surface, so you head down to Norien to aid in the defense of, oh shit, wrong footage. As you and the other hunters work to restore the defense cannons on Norian, a wormhole opens up and Squidward starts hurtling towards Norian and threatens to kill everyone on it. After battling through hordes of enemies, you eventually have this fight with Meta Ridley's crotch, which is neat for a few seconds. After that though, you have this Jurassic Park arcade-ass fight with Meta Ridley as you both plummet and try to kill each other. It's so sick, dude! During the fight, the perspective even changes from you being below him looking up to you being above him and shooting down. That was rad as hell! You can tell right away that they were making great use of the Wiimote controls and your actual aiming skill, rather than the lock-on and mash A style of the GameCube titles. Frozone shows up and saves your ass, and eventually you get to the cannon control room, when the evolved form of Metroid Prime shows up and blasts all your asses into next month. And with her last bit of energy, Samus activates the cannon, which destroys the meteor before it collides with Norian. You wake up a month later to find Samus strapped in a doctor's chair as a scientist explains to you that your body got so mangled by Dark Samus that it's now corrupted and producing Phazon itself. See, I wasn't kidding. She actually blasted you into next month. You've essentially been seeded by the Phazon testicle, and you are now pregnant with your very own Phazonic tumor. Congrats! Thankfully though, you get equipped with a new PED suit, which I really dig the look of. Kind of a mixture of her gritty Prime aesthetic and the default suit from Dread. Not only do I love the look of this thing, but it actually serves an active gameplay function. I couldn't believe this, but was so happy to see a suit upgrade actually matter to the player for once. At the cost of 100 energy, you can enter hyper mode, which lets you deal an absolutely disgusting amount of damage. Your health bar gets replaced with a Phazon meter, which depletes as you use your various hyper mode abilities. Getting hit by enemies will increase this, however, because after a few seconds, you become overloaded and corrupted. And if you don't vent all of your Phazon out of you, well, this happens. Spooky. So while you're technically invincible and don't take damage, you leave yourself open to being instantly killed by the corruption of Dark Samus. I just want to say, this resource management of balancing energy, Phazon, and toying with death in order to dish out the huge deeps is one of the best things the Prime series has done so far. Suddenly your energy matters, your decisions in combat matter. Combat itself matters, and is for once actually fun. Each encounter doesn't boil down to shoot Purple Boy with purple, or wait 30 seconds until the invisible asshole decides he wants to show up and be shot. Now you gotta weigh the options, take stock of who's in the room and how to take down each enemy, and make sure you have enough energy to go into hyper mode and come out safely. By God, it actually feels like I'm playing an FPS game with a focus on shooting things in the first person. There's plenty of instances where the game tests your aiming as well, whether it be these drone enemies or certain bosses having various weak spots that you can't just lock onto and mash the bang bang button. Now, all that being said, it does feel like most of that is only true near the start of the game when you don't have a gagillion energy tanks. Eventually you just get so many that the dominant strategy becomes to just hyper mode everyone in the room as fast as possible, sometimes even entering it multiple times to flatten every skinny nerd in the room in seconds. Seriously, are these pirates not eating? Why are they so flimsy in this game? I also found a nice trick to beat these drone guys. Now that's skill, baby. Alright, let's finish up the intro. After testing out the new PED suit, Samus meets with the AU unit who tells her that the other hunters woke up long before she did, and were sent off to investigate 3 different planets, all of which had Leviathans crash onto them. A Leviathan being what would have hit Norian had we not defended it, and what appear to be planetary infection bombs made of Phazon that are basically just like Lavos from Chrono Trigger. They land on a planet, corrupt everything living there, reproduce, and shoot their seed off into the void in search of new planetary hosts. The other 3 hunters were also infected though, and given PED suits much like Samus was, but all contact with them was lost a week ago. So it's up to Samus to travel to each of these planets, finish the job, and look out for the other hunters while investigating the space pirates. Now, it's officially on! Samus's theme starts blasting and the Metroid game begins. Samus takes off in her gunship and heads to the nearest planet, Brio. And from this point on, it's what you'd expect from a Metroid Prime game, but in a much smoother, more streamlined fashion. And god damn do I love that! Prime needed this! The map is no longer a complex Rubik's Cube that's split into 2 dimensions, nor does it require you to backtrack for miles through similar areas anymore, because of one new fantastic feature that I love. The gunship is now implemented into the gameplay and acts as a fast travel system.
Yes! That's awesome!
This makes traversing the worlds you're on so much less tedious, and finally includes one of Samus's iconic tools into the gameplay itself. Your ship can also do bombing runs in large areas, and use its own version of the grapple beam to come pick up and place massive objects. Though to be honest, I almost never used these features unless I had to. I didn't even know I could bomb an area until I accidentally switched to my ship visor and saw this symbol. There's a new expansion item that is for the ship missiles, so I figured at some point in the game there'd be a moment where I could actively fly the ship and fire it, but nope, they're just used for this feature only. Kind of weak, but it's still something new. And seriously, just being able to call down your ship at these locations is, it's incredible. I know it sounds like it's not that big a deal, but it is a huge deal. Prime 1 and 2 just soured me on walking and backtracking so much. There isn't even a huge amount of landing pads, just like 3 or 4 per planet, so it's not overdone. I can't praise this thing enough, though it does have one tiny little annoying thing that gets to me. It plays the game loading theme every single goddamn time you get out of the ship. It sucks the power right out of the song, and I love this song. It marked the start of a journey or resuming an existing one. It was a song connecting Samus to the player, since it always finished its fanfare just as you took control of her. Now it just feels like it plays whenever you successfully use your gunship. I mean, it's cool, but it's not that cool. The most ironic and hilarious thing about this is that it doesn't even play when you do load the game. Look! Very nitpicky, but it's just a little much. The game layout this time is a bit different. Instead of one giant planet with various zones, it's a few smaller planets with a couple of zones. And this too, I really like a lot. Functionally though, this is hardly much different than traveling to different areas of Prime 1 and 2 via the elevators, though now it makes a bit more sense environmentally speaking. Having Phendrana Drifts be right next to Megmore Caverns didn't really make a whole lot of sense. Now we get a handful of unique planets, each with their own progression and puzzles to solve, all connected through the gunship, and none of them feel like they overstay their welcome at all, mostly due to the much more streamlined nature of their layouts. This is commonly where critics of the game get all flustered and red in the face and squeal, "Stop having fun! Metroid should be about getting lost!" Since most areas, while not being a straight line, are pretty linear in nature. The game focuses way more on the action pieces and moving the player forward at a good pace. My favorite word. Pace. Pace. The pacing of this game is so much better than the first 2 Prime games. You're constantly seeing new areas, getting a steady supply of upgrades, and the set pieces are varied enough that you don't get bored of looking at them by the time the game is over. In fact, this game is goddamn gorgeous! Skytown usually gets the most praise for its beauty, and rightfully so. This entire structure suspended above the sky is magnificent to look at, and spending time ziplining between these massive structures is just breathtaking. Overall, I just feel like the worlds in Prime 3 are so much more fun to be in. They're fast, there's always something new to do, and they're easy on the eyes. Unfortunately though, they're not so easy on the ears. The music in Prime 3 sucks. There's maybe 1 or 2 tracks I actually enjoy, but the rest is some generic orchestrated background garbage. Some of it sounds like that farty joke track from Sonic Unleashed or Resident Evil. Just listen to this. Okay, it's not quite that bad, but there's not many tracks that have me going back and listening to them after the game is done. As you can probably tell, I've barely used any actual music from the game for this video. I tried to, but it was just harshing my vibe in a big way. The best tracks are usually the remixes from previous games, however, a couple I really enjoyed, like the Skytown theme, which I kind of feel has a Kingdom Hearts vibe. Listen to this. But the best track by far was the fight against Rundus. Yes, that's right, Rundus. As you go to the various planets to investigate what's happening, you find that your hunter buddies have been AFK so long because they've become totally corrupted by Dark Samus and the Phazon within them. And these fights are probably my favorite in the game after the Meta Ridley opener. Even though I think the game wants you to feel way more emotion during these fights than I actually did, there is a bit of story weight behind them since you're forced to fight against your comrades. The music, especially with Rundus' theme, match that feeling too. It's like a begrudging fight that nobody asked for, but sadly, it has to be this way. Except Gore, because after he did this to my precious gunship,
I had to choke a bitch.
these fights, however, are merely the appetizers for the final boss of the area. Each planet requires you to breach into the crashed Leviathan in a few differing ways, one of which involves you literally building a nuke with the gunship in Skytown and smashing it on top of the Leviathan.
You called down the thunder, now reap the whirlwind.
Once you're inside, you fight the main boss of the area, and these range from fun to stupidly easy to, oh my god, why won't you die? This is agonizing. I seriously had to fight Moganor for what felt like the entire length of Metroid Zero Mission. He's set up to again take advantage of the new aiming controls, forcing you to aim at various parts in his body, which I don't find to be a problem. The problem is, he's invincible for so goddamn long. You need to shoot at his red orbs, which can only be shot occasionally while they're exposed, and they have a ton of health. He can close them all up and swap them around, which just gets annoying. The excruciating part of this fight, though, is that he can revive and repair them, and he does this often. If you're not prepared immediately to shoot them out of the air the second he starts this animation, one of those red balls will be completely restored to full health. The hyper mode difficulty just makes this problem even worse, no doubt. So again, I don't recommend playing on it. Sure, it gives the PED suit a little more reason to exist, but all it does is inflate enemy health pools so that they're not any more difficult, they just suck more of your life away. And I'm not talking about Samus either, I'm talking about you, the player. Don't do it. You're still young. Probably. A rematch with the new Omega Ridley is a lot of fun and uses the combo of X-Ray Visor and Nova Beam nicely. Oh yeah, let's talk about the new upgrades in this game, because there are loads. My favorite of the bunch, and one of the first upgrades you get, is the Grapple Lasso. This thing is so fun to use, man, and feels much better than the stiffness of the Grapple Beam from games prior. The nunchuck can be thrust forward while locked onto certain targets to have Samus's left hand whip that shit forward and attach onto enemies, debris, or mechanisms. This is used in both combat and exploration, and having more options in combat is just what this series needed, dude, let me tell you. Not every enemy can be lassoed, mind you, but a lot of them can, and from there you can rip parts of their armor away, overload them with energy until they pop using the grapple voltage upgrade, or suck them dry by siphoning their life force and give yourself some heals. You can tear tentacles off some enemies or chunks of armor off larger mini-bosses. It's fun! And even if it's not that hard to figure out, it just feels cool to actually use your left arm to do something in a game with Samus's left arm. This is the kind of immersion me likey. Another thing I absolutely love now is that the beam upgrades now stack like they did in Super Metroid. Salute the fucking sun! Not having to do the beam switching was the biggest weight off my very sore and tired back after getting through Prime 1 and 2. Now all your combat options are a single button press away. Shoot your beam or charge it up, fire missiles, enter hyper mode, enter morph ball, grapple lasso, jump and strafe around. There's zero clunky ass beam swapping that needs to be done. Granted, in the GameCube version of the first two games, this wasn't nearly as big a pain in the ass as I'm making it out to be now, but goddamn, that was one serious downside to the Trilogy version of the first two games. Let me tell you, that's all gone now. We start off with the power beam, which allows for quick rapid fire shots, then we upgrade that with the plasma beam, which just changes your power beam shots to metal melting magma mortars. And finally, the Nova beam, which is essentially the wave beam from the 2D games, since it allows you to shoot through some obstacles. The best part about the Nova beam though, is when you combined it with the returning X-ray visor, you can find internal weak points within the enemy's body and shoot directly at them for a quicker kill, giving you yet another option in combat, and having an actual fun, practical use for the X-ray visor. Mixing upgrades like this feels so incredible, and I wish the Metroid series as a whole did this more. Super Metroid gave you a little taste with a few combos, like the charge beam and bombs, or speed boost and space jump. Prime 1 kind of tried with the whole thermal visor wave beam combo, but it was just a snooze in execution. I love it when the upgrades can be used in interesting ways that aren't just progression keys, and I feel like the options given to the player in Prime 3 do this really really well. Though there are still upgrades that stick to this lock and key trope. Hyper Mode gets a few upgrades that can only be used within it. Hyper Ball, Hyper Missile, and Hyper Grapple. But these didn't see much use for me other than when it was necessary to progress. Mainly because your Hyper Beam and its associated charge shot just melt ass in seconds. I said it before and I'll say it again. All of these combat options are great, but a lot of the time the best and easiest option is to just Hyper Mode. Even the Ice Missile upgrade isn't all that great. It's fun against certain enemies and for freezing parts of the terrain or sections of a boss, but they're so pitifully weak. Just look at this. At least this time around they actually look like missiles though. The Boost Ball, Screw Attack, Seeker Missiles, and Spider Ball all return, and yeah, they do the things they did before. There's seriously nothing new to do with these What? Whoa. Hold on here. What is this? Oh, shit! Finally, your suit gets an armor upgrade called the Hazard Shield to prevent damage from acid rain on the pirate homeworld. The shoulder pads look cool. That's it. Big meh. This game's so fun, man, and there's a lot of details that you could completely miss if you blink for a second. For example, when you first land on Brio, you'll find it's got a real ancient temple vibe to it, but there's huge chunks of random ice everywhere. Then when you realize why, it finally slaps you upside the head that it was because of Rundus probably succumbing to his corruption. Speaking of which, after you defeat each Leviathan, Samus gets more and more corrupted as her Phazon pregnancy starts to give her a serious case of morning sickness. If you open up your scan visor at various points in the game, you can see Phazon veins popping out of Samus's face and her eyes start to glow a harsher blue. That's fucking cool! And I'ma say it again, it ties the story to the gameplay. As you become more corrupted, entering Hyper Mode becomes more risky, and occasionally you can enter a state of Hyper Mode where you just can't cancel out and go full on Berserker to let out all of your Phazon. And if you don't, you die. When the gameplay matches the lore and story, that's just the perfect recipe for good video game. I just felt so much more immersed in this game than I did the first two, and it's honestly because of the gameplay, not because of the goddamn scan logs. What got me was moments like creeping through one of the side areas in Skytown and finding these dimension warping Metroids, or heading back to Norian and stumbling into this insane Metroid hatcher at the bottom of the base. Some things broke my immersion a little, like these hand scanners. I'm no expert, but aren't these supposed to scan your hand? Samus's hand looks nothing like this. The security in this universe is whack, bro. There's one other thing I haven't touched on yet, and that's the multitude of various switches, puzzles, and interactive gadgets that utilize the Wiimote. I hear the word gimmicky thrown around a lot when referring to these, but what makes something a gimmick? Is the scan visor also a gimmick? Maybe I'm just not familiar with the meaning of the word, because to me it's just a new gameplay function that was finally possible on the new hardware. And let me say this, I kind of like them. Listen, I'm a huge fan of Mario Party, and I love these weird little mini games, especially the ones using the plasma beam to reconnect the fuses. It's fun and tests your accuracy, speed, and hand-eye coordination really well, and there's not so many of them that they overstay their welcome. I'll also say this, it is way more interesting than just fucking scanning something to activate it. I'll turn cranks all day if it means less scan visor use, let me tell you. Alright, let's wrap up the story, shall we? The endgame fetch quest this time is thankfully not a pain in the ass and can be easily finished before you even have to really search for anything. You need 5 fuel cells to open the final area and get the space pirate codes in the abandoned GFS Valhalla, a Federation ship that is completely infested with Metroids and had its AU unit gutted right out of it. This time around there are 9 total fuel cells, but the extra 4 are only there if you want them and give you a couple extra upgrades. When I finished the Space Pirate homeworld, I already had 8 of the 9 fuel tanks. I couldn't believe it. Mind you, I did run around to collect some upgrades at one point for maybe an hour, but this is far better than the Chozo artifacts or Sky Temple keys. The only nitpick I have with this is that the layout of the Valhalla doesn't really convey very well which path is for upgrades and which path is required. And once you use a fuel cell, it's stuck in there like the batteries in that Game Boy you forgot about in the attic. You can't remove them, so if you only have 5 and accidentally use one to grab an upgrade, you'll need to find the others to get the pirate codes. Thankfully, this isn't that difficult. These things aren't that well hidden. Fixing the endgame fetch quest is another big fat dub for Prime 3 over its older brothers. Once you have the codes, it's time to travel to the final planet, Phase, the source of all Phazon in the galaxy and the source of the Leviathans that have been infesting the various planets. Apparently, the space pirates have been shooting up Phazon so hard, they now believe Dark Samus is their almighty leader and worship her as a sexy blue god. This contextualizes why the space pirates can go into hyper mode like you can, since they are fully on the juice. Samus lands on Phase and immediately has a fucking Phase-on overdose. The only way she survives is by venting every single one of her E-tanks and gets permanently stuck in hyper mode. Samus's ship won't even recognize her at this point, cause she got it bad. You no longer have energy, and taking damage just increases your Phase-on meter. And if it ever maxes out, yup, you're dead. As you head deeper and deeper into Phase, you encounter all kinds of Phase-on freaks and geeks, including a baby Leviathan, which you need to, yet again. Then you finally come face to face with your baby girl, the Honorable Dark Samus Prime Esquire. The fight is fine. She's got some flashy moves, but goddamn, even now, the Hyper Beam Charge Shot just dumpsters her. Even in Hyper Mode, this just feels wrong. There's something to be said about Samus being so corrupted at this point that she's insanely powerful, but Dark Samus literally is pure Phase-on personified. Anyway, after this comes the most predictable final boss of all time, the corrupted AU unit from the Valhalla, AU Unit 313, who fuses with Dark Samus to give us a proper Mother Brain type showdown. Now this fight was actually pretty fantastic. I enjoyed this one a lot more than Metroid Prime or Emperor Ring, just due to how much active aiming, dodging, keeping an eye on your Phase-on meter the battle requires of you. When I finally took the AU unit down in hyper mode, I was just, oh my god, I was a second away from dying. That felt really good. The combined power of the AU unit and Dark Samus are finally defeated, and with that, it looks like all Phase-on in the universe vaporizes out of existence, including the Phase-on within Samus herself, totally curing her corruption. Wow, that's convenient. What the hell was making and controlling the Phase-on before Dark Samus was running the show? Shouldn't we need to deal with that as well? After that, it's time for the escape. No, just kidding. It's just Admiral Dane Cook thinking about ya.
You've just driven into Fuckville, and she's the mayor.
Samus sends off the mission complete text, has a moment to think about her friends she spent less than 5 minutes with, and takes off into the galaxy. The MCU-style after credits tease at the end of the game shows Silex from Metroid Prime hunters chasing after you. And this won't be the last time we see him in the Prime series, but more on that in the future. Stay tuned, boppers.
So that was Metroid Prime 3 Corruption. I really liked it. The weird thing is, I don't think I would have liked it nearly as much if I didn't play Prime 1 and 2 first, since their pacing really highlighted aspects of the Prime series that I was not a fan of. Corruption streamlines the progression, makes the combat interesting, does a lot of fun new things with its upgrades, the motion control, and the gunship, and overall was just a flat-out fun experience. This is my favorite game so far in the Prime series, and the most likely candidate for a repeat playthrough for me. And because of that, I'm putting Metroid Prime 3 Corruption in the middle of the A tier.
Huge shout out and thanks go to my supporters on Patreon. The fact that you guys are generous enough to support me and want to see my creations fills me with determination. Big thanks go out to Connor Binder, James Cummings, Welfare High, Melody Love, Redmond, and Pyrrha Kong. You guys rock. If you ever wanted to support me on Patreon, head on over to patreon.com/TarvaldsQuest and check out the various tiers and rewards, including a custom-made sprite head. For those of you who don't know, I stream every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday, when I can, over at twitch.tv/TarvaldsQuest. So definitely head over there and drop a follow to know when I go live. And if you ever miss a stream, you can catch all the VODs over on my second YouTube channel, youtube.com/TarvaldsQuestVOD, where you can catch up on any playthrough that I've done so far. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you on the next quest. Wait, there's something I'm supposed to show you guys. Right.
Oh god. Got it. Metroid Prime 3.